The American dream wasn't supposed to look like this. At least, not the version Sarah and I had imagined when we first drove into Pinewood Estates that crisp October morning. The subdivision sprawled before us like a perfectly pressed collar, each house a precise stitch in an immaculate suburban tapestry. We were the quintessential middle-class success story. I had Michael Thompson, a 38-year-old civil engineer, and my wife Sarah, a 36-year-old paralegal, had spent 15 years saving, planning, and dreaming of this moment. Our combined income, careful investments, and Sarah's meticulous budgeting had finally brought us here, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with just enough yard to feel like we'd escaped the concrete jungle. Pinewood Estates advertised itself as more than just a neighborhood. It was a lifestyle community. The marketing materials, glossy brochures we'd collected during our home search, promised security, harmony, and unparalleled property values. Pristine sidewalks wound between identical houses, each with perfectly trimmed lawns that looked like they'd been manicured by obsessive gardeners with nail scissors and ruler-straight edging tools. The community boasted amenities that seemed too good to be true. A clubhouse with a state-of-the-art fitness center, a swimming pool that looked like it belonged in a 5-star resort, and walking trails that meandered through carefully preserved green spaces. During our initial tour, a cheerful real estate agent named Diane had practically sung the praises of the Homeowners Association. "The HOA here is top-notch," she'd said, her bright red nails tapping against a folder filled with community guidelines. "They maintain property values like nobody's business. Everything is regulated to perfection." We should have seen the warning signs, should have recognized that regulated to perfection was code for something more sinister. Victor Hartley, the HOA president, was a man who seemed to have been born to enforce rules. A retired accountant in his mid-60s, he moved through the neighborhood like a general inspecting his troops. His wife, Margaret, the board secretary, was his perfect complement. Where Victor was stern, she was meticulous. Where he barked orders, she noted every minute detail. Our first interaction with Victor came during the community welcome gathering. It was supposed to be a friendly meet and greet, but felt more like an orientation into a highly structured military camp. Homeowners stood in neat rows, listening to Victor outline the 247-page community rulebook. Yes, Sarah counted the pages later that evening. "A community is only as strong as its weakest link," Victor proclaimed, his voice carrying across the manicured clubhouse lawn. "And we at Pinewood Estates have zero tolerance for weakness." Sarah squeezed my hand. I could see the lawyer in her already analyzing every word, every implied threat. The rulebook was a marvel of bureaucratic excess. Regulations covered everything from acceptable house paint colors, a grand total of 7 shades, all variations of beige and off-white, to the precise height of holiday decorations. Lawn ornaments were restricted. Garden designs had to be pre-approved. Even the type of mulch was regulated. "Who has time to measure mulch?" I whispered to Sarah. She just raised an eyebrow. Apparently they do. Our neighbors seemed a mix of resigned acceptance and quiet desperation. Some had lived in Pinewood Estates for decades, beaten into submission by years of HOA enforcement. Others were newer residents, their initial excitement slowly being ground down by the relentless bureaucracy. Robert Garcia, a local electrician who lived 2 doors down, gave us a knowing look during Victor's speech. His work van, essential to his livelihood, was already a point of contention with the HOA. We would learn later that he had received multiple violations for parking it in his own driveway. Little did we know that our dream home was about to become a battleground. The first warning would arrive soon. A pristine white envelope that would mark the beginning of our war with the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. The American dream was about to get a reality check. The first violation notice arrived 3 weeks after we'd finished unpacking. A crisp white envelope with the Pinewood Estates HOA letterhead, official enough to make your heart skip a beat. Sarah opened it while I was making coffee, her initial chuckle quickly transforming into a look of disbelief. "You're not going to believe this," she said, sliding the letter across the kitchen counter. Violation Notice PW 2023-47, Mailbox Placement and Color Violation. Assessed fine, $50. The details were comically specific. Our mailbox sat 2.3 inches lower than the community standard height. The navy blue paint we'd chosen, a color we'd carefully selected to complement our home's exterior, was apparently outside the approved color spectrum. The letter included a color-coded chart of acceptable mailbox hues, each shade more mind-numbingly similar than the last. I called the HOA office, hoping for some reasonable discourse. Margaret Hartley answered, her voice as sharp as freshly pressed stationery. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "rules are rules. The mailbox height is crucial for uniform community appearance and emergency service accessibility." "Crucial?" I repeated. "It's 2 inches. 2 inches that somehow threaten the entire neighborhood." Margaret's response was swift and practiced. "Mr. Thompson, when you purchased your home in Pinewood Estates, you agreed to abide by our comprehensive community guidelines. The mailbox standards are clearly outlined in Section 4, subsection C of the HOA bylaws." Before I could respond, she continued, "You have 10 days to correct the violation or face additional fines." Sarah, who had been listening, took the phone. "And the color?" she asked, her paralegal instincts already parsing the ridiculous regulation. "Approved colors are listed in the community palette." Margaret responded, "Your current shade is unauthorized. Repainting is mandatory." The next week became a mailbox compliance project. I spent an entire Saturday lifting our mailbox, measuring with scientific precision, and repainting it from our beloved navy to a color the HOA deemed acceptable. A bland, almost gray shade of blue that looked like it had been chosen by a committee of accountants. But the mailbox was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, another violation arrived. This time, it was about our front yard landscaping. Apparently, the mulch we used, a rich dark brown variety we purchased from a local garden center, was not on the approved mulch list. The fine, $75. "Who," Sarah muttered, "has an approved mulch list?" Victor Hartley, it seemed. During the next community meeting, he made a point of approaching us, dressed in pressed khakis and a polo shirt that looked like it had never seen a wrinkle. He exuded an air of bureaucratic superiority. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice carrying across the clubhouse meeting room, "we appreciate your recent compliance with the mailbox regulations. However, your current landscaping requires immediate attention." Robert Garcia, sitting nearby, rolled his eyes. We'd begun to recognize a silent camaraderie among the homeowners, a shared suffering under the HOA's microscopic scrutiny. The mulch violation required us to remove the entire landscaping and replace it with an approved variety. The cost would be substantial, easily over $500 for materials and labor, all because our mulch didn't meet some arbitrary standard. "This is ridiculous," I whispered to Sarah. "We're paying for the privilege of living in a place that controls every aspect of our property." Sarah was already taking notes, not just mentally, but literally. She'd started a detailed blog of every interaction, every violation, every fine. Her paralegal training was kicking into high gear. "They're creating a paper trail," she said, "and so are we." Little did Victor and Margaret know, but each petty violation was building something they couldn't control. A resistance, a determination to fight back against their bureaucratic tyranny. The war with the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association had officially begun. By the time summer rolled around, our interactions with the Pinewood Estates HOA had become a second full-time job. The violations multiplied like a bureaucratic hydra. Cut one down, and 2 more would appear. Our neighbor Robert Garcia became our unexpected ally. His work van, a lifeline to his electrical business, had become the HOA's latest target. Victor Hartley had declared the vehicle a permanent eyesore that violated community aesthetic standards. Never mind that Robert needed the van to support his family, to run his business that served half the neighborhood. "They'd want me to rent a storage unit miles away," Robert told us one evening over beers in my driveway, carefully positioned to be out of view of any potential HOA surveillance. "A storage unit that costs more per month than my truck payment." The fines were relentless. By midsummer, we'd accumulated $500 in HOA violations. The list read like a Kafkaesque novel of suburban oppression. $250. Unauthorized garden gnome placement. $350. Trash invisibility on non-collection days. $475. Unapproved exterior light fixture. $600. Lawn height exceeding 2.75 inches. $1,200. Temporary storage of construction materials. 2 planters we purchased for a weekend landscaping project. Sarah's documentation had become a work of art. Each violation was meticulously catalogued, photographed, and analyzed. She discovered inconsistencies in the HOA's enforcement. Some neighbors seemed immune to the endless citations, while others were targeted relentlessly. Our first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Emma Richardson, a retired lawyer living 3 doors down, approached us during a neighborhood block party. She'd been quietly observing our battle with the HOA. "They've been doing this for years," Emma whispered, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I've seen good families driven out of this neighborhood, people who couldn't afford the constant fines, who were broken by the system." She shared stories of previous homeowners, families who had been forced to sell, businesses that had been crippled by the HOA's arbitrary enforcement. A pattern emerged. The HOA seemed to target specific homeowners, creating a climate of fear and compliance. Robert's situation became our rallying point. His work van wasn't just a vehicle, it was his livelihood. The HOA's actions weren't just petty, they were potentially destroying a small business. We began to gather evidence. Sarah started interviewing neighbors, collecting stories of HOA overreach. Robert documented every interaction with the board. We discovered we weren't alone. Many homeowners lived in quiet terror, afraid to speak up. The turning point came during the August community meeting. Victor Hartley stood at the podium, reading yet another list of violations. But this time, something was different. Whispers grew, heads turned. The usual atmosphere of submissive compliance had begun to crack. I moved to discuss the consistency of our violation enforcement. Robert spoke up, his voice steady and clear. Victor's face turned an alarming shade of red. Margaret shuffled her papers nervously. The room fell silent. Emma Richardson raised her hand. "I'd like to second that motion." One by one, more homeowners began to speak. Stories of selective enforcement, tales of seemingly arbitrary fines. The carefully constructed facade of the HOA's authority began to crumble. Victor tried to maintain control, but his grip was slipping. For the first time, homeowners were speaking up, sharing their experiences, supporting each other. Sarah leaned over to me, a glint in her eye. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. The war with the HOA was no longer a private battle. It had become a community uprising. As we left the meeting that night, the air felt different. Charged. Hopeful. The neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now spoke in hushed, determined conversations. Victor Hartley's reign of terror was about to face its first real challenge. September brought the most terrifying weapon in the HOA's arsenal. A certified letter that made my blood run cold. The words, "Notice of Potential Foreclosure," were stamped in bold red letters across the top of the document. Our total accumulated fines had reached $12,750. Victor Hartley and the whole board were now threatening to place a lien on our property, effectively holding our home hostage over a series of increasingly ridiculous violations. Sarah spread the documents across our kitchen table, her paralegal skills kicking into high gear. Each violation was carefully examined, cross-referenced, dissected. "They're bluffing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The foreclosure threat wasn't just aimed at us. Robert Garcia had received a similar letter. The HOA had discovered that his work van, his literal lifeline, was registered to a business address outside the neighborhood. They were using this technicality to claim he was violating residential vehicle restrictions. Emma Richardson confirmed our worst fears during an emergency neighborhood meeting held in her living room. "They've done this before," she revealed, pulling out a thick folder of historical documents. At least 3 families in the past decade were forced out of Pinewood estates through similar tactics. The method was calculated and cruel. pile on enough fines, create enough financial pressure, force homeowners to sell or face foreclosure. Victor's strategy became clear. He wasn't just enforcing rules, he was curating the neighborhood, selecting who could and couldn't live in Pinewood Estates. Robert's situation was particularly devastating. The HOA claimed his work van violated multiple community standards. Commercial vehicle parked in a residential area, exceeding specified vehicle height restrictions, inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetic standards. The fine for his van violations alone approached $5,000. For a small business owner, it was potentially devastating. They want me to rent a storage facility 30 miles away, Robert told us, showing the detailed HOA communication. A facility that would cost more per month than my truck payment. It's designed to break me. Our own violations read like a surreal comedy of suburban bureaucracy. $1,200 for unauthorized exterior lighting, $750 for non-compliant garden design, $2,500 for excessive front yard decoration. The garden decoration, 2 additional flower pots and a bird feeder. The lighting, solar-powered path lights that were 5 inches taller than the HOA's prescribed maximum height. Sarah began documenting everything with forensic precision. Photographs, measurements, correspondence. She created a binder so comprehensive it looked like preparation for a major legal battle. They're counting on us being overwhelmed, she said one evening, surrounded by stacks of papers. They're counting on us giving up. But we weren't giving up. Not now. Emma Richardson provided crucial historical context. The HOA had a pattern of targeting specific homeowners, families with children, small business owners, anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of ideal residence. It's economic cleansing, Emma explained. They use these fines and threats to push out anyone who doesn't conform to their perfect suburban vision. The foreclosure threat was their ultimate weapon, a nuclear option designed to intimidate and control. But they had miscalculated. Instead of breaking us, they had united us. Neighbors who had previously avoided each other now shared information, compared notes, realized they weren't alone. Robert, Sarah, Emma, and I began to form a plan, not just to fight back, but to expose the HOA's systematic harassment. Victor Hartley and the board had declared war, and we were about to fight back. The peaceful facade of Pinewood Estates was about to crack wide open. Strategy meetings became our new normal. Emma Richardson's living room transformed into a war room, with legal documents, HOA bylaws, and carefully organized evidence covering every available surface. They'd made one critical mistake, Emma said, adjusting her reading glasses. Their own bylaws are a minefield of inconsistencies. Sarah had been meticulously combing through the 247-page HOA rulebook. What started as a tedious document review became our most potent weapon. Inconsistencies jumped out like hidden landmines, contradictory clauses, selectively enforced regulations, vague language that could be interpreted multiple ways. Robert's van became our first test case. The HOA claimed it violated residential vehicle restrictions, but Emma discovered a crucial loophole. The bylaws defined commercial vehicle in a way that actually exempted Robert's specific type of work van. They're banking on people not reading the fine print, Sarah explained, spreading out a color-coded analysis of the bylaws. Each highlighted section represented a potential legal challenge. Our next move was gathering community support. Emma reached out to her network, retired lawyers, local journalists, community activists. We needed to transform our private battle into a public issue. Emily Chen, a local investigative reporter from the Pinewood Gazette, became our unexpected ally. When we first approached her, she was skeptical, but the evidence was compelling. This isn't just about mailbox heights and mulch, Emily told us during our first meeting. This looks like systematic harassment. She began digging, financial records, past board members, property sale histories. A pattern emerged that was more sinister than we'd initially suspected. The HOA board seemed to target specific homeowners, families with children, small business owners, those who didn't fit their narrow definition of ideal residence. Property values weren't just being maintained, They were being manipulated. Our first public move was strategic. Robert filed a formal appeal challenging the van violation. Sarah prepared the documentation with surgical precision. Every I dotted, every T crossed. Meanwhile, we started a neighborhood information campaign, flyers, private Facebook groups, word-of-mouth networks. Homeowners who had previously suffered in silence began to speak up. Emma uncovered something particularly interesting. Victor Hartley and several board members had direct financial connections to local real estate development companies. Each time a family was forced out, property values seemed to benefit specific connected parties. It's not just harassment, Emma explained. It looks like a deliberate economic strategy. The local city council took notice. A preliminary inquiry was launched into the HOA's practices. Victor Hartley's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Our evidence was comprehensive. Documented pattern of selective enforcement, financial irregularities in HOA management, potential conflicts of interest among board members, multiple violations of fair housing practices. Robert's appeal became the first official challenge. The language was masterful, citing specific bylaw sections, highlighting the inconsistencies, demanding a comprehensive review of the violation. The HOA board's response was telling. Instead of a confident rebuttal, they sent a vague, threatening letter that revealed more about their weakness than their strength. "They're scared," Sarah said, reading the letter. "This isn't the response of people confident in their position. This is damage control." Emily Chen was preparing her story. The Pinewood Gazette was ready to blow the lid off the HOA's practices. Victor Hartley had no idea what was coming. The quiet rebellion of Pinewood Estates was about to become very loud. The first domino fell on a crisp October morning. Emily Chen's expose hit the Pinewood Gazette like a sledgehammer. Pinewood Estates HOA, a system of calculated harassment, blazed across the front page, accompanied by a meticulously researched article that laid bare the HOA's systematic targeting of homeowners. The article revealed everything: financial improprieties, selective enforcement, potential real estate manipulation. Victor Hartley's carefully constructed facade crumbled under the weight of documented evidence. Within hours, the story went viral. Local news picked it up. Social media exploded. Homeowners from across the region began sharing similar stories of HOA overreach. Victor's response was panic personified. Instead of a measured legal rebuttal, he resorted to threats. A cease and desist letter arrived at Emily Chen's office, which only served to make the story more compelling. Journalists love nothing more than a powerful entity trying to silence the truth. The city council, which had been quietly investigating the HOA, suddenly became very interested. What started as a routine inquiry transformed into a full-scale investigation. Margaret Hartley, Victor's wife and HOA secretary, was the first to crack. She resigned from the board abruptly, leaving a terse note citing personal reasons. But we knew better. Our investigation had uncovered her own set of violations. Ironically, she'd been breaking many of the same rules she'd enforced against others. Robert Garcia's van became a symbol of resistance. His carefully prepared appeal exposed multiple inconsistencies in the HOA's vehicle restrictions. The board's attempts to counter his claims only revealed more holes in their regulations. Board members began to turn on each other. James Henderson, the treasurer, reached out to Emma Richardson. His hands shaking during their meeting, he shared internal documents that painted an even darker picture of the HOA's operations. "We never meant for it to go this far," James confessed. Victor changed everything. The financial records were damning. Kickbacks from local real estate developers, inflated maintenance contracts, money funneled through shell companies. What had started as a neighborhood management organization had become a well-oiled machine of financial manipulation. Our group, Sarah, Robert, Emma, and I, continued to methodically build our case. Each piece of evidence was carefully documented, cross-referenced, verified. The city's legal department became involved. Subpoenas were issued, bank records examined. Years of HOA documents were scrutinized under a microscope. Victor Hartley's network began to disintegrate. Real estate developers who had benefited from the HOA's practices suddenly became distant. Board members who had once been his staunchest allies now avoided his calls. A special community meeting was called, but this time it was different. Instead of Victor controlling the narrative, homeowners demanded answers. The clubhouse was packed, more people than had ever attended an HOA meeting before. "We want transparency," Robert declared, his voice steady and strong. "We want fair enforcement. We want accountability." The board members looked shell-shocked. Victor tried to maintain his composure, but the cracks were visible. His perfect veneer was breaking. Emily Chen sat in the back, taking notes. Her next article was already taking shape. A deep dive into how HOAs across the region had become tools of economic manipulation. Sarah squeezed my hand. "We're winning," she whispered. The quiet rebellion of Pinewood Estates was no longer quiet. It had become a full-scale uprising. Victor Hartley's kingdom was about to fall. The special community hearing was scheduled for a cold November evening. The Pinewood Estates clubhouse, typically a bastion of HOA-controlled silence, now buzzed with an electric anticipation. City officials, local journalists, and nearly every homeowner in the neighborhood packed the room. Victor Hartley sat at the front table, his once impeccable demeanor now visibly frayed. The remaining HOA board members looked like cornered animals, their usual confidence replaced by a palpable sense of dread. Emily Chen from the Pinewood Gazette sat front and center, her notebook open, pen poised. Behind her, a camera crew from the local news station prepared their equipment. Sarah had prepared our case like a master litigator. Months of meticulous documentation, financial records, and witness statements were about to be unveiled. "We're not just addressing individual violations," Sarah began, her voice clear and commanding. "We're exposing a systematic pattern of harassment, financial manipulation, and abuse of power." The presentation was devastating. Each slide revealed another layer of the HOA's corruption: selective enforcement of rules, undocumented fines, kickbacks from local real estate developers, deliberate property value manipulation. James Henderson, the former treasurer who had turned whistleblower, provided crucial testimony. He detailed how Victor had been orchestrating a long-term scheme to force out certain homeowners, creating opportunities for connected real estate developers. It was never about maintaining community standards, James testified, his voice breaking. It was about control, about money. Robert Garcia's story became a powerful centerpiece. His work van, once a target of relentless fines, was now a symbol of resistance. He detailed how the HOA had attempted to destroy his small business through repeated, baseless violations. Emma Richardson presented historical documentation showing a pattern of harassment stretching back nearly a decade. Families forced out, small businesses targeted, a systematic approach to reshaping the neighborhood through economic pressure. Victor Hartley's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. His attempts to interrupt were met with swift rebuttals. The city officials present looked increasingly grim. The turning point came unexpectedly. Margaret Hartley, Victor's wife, who had resigned earlier, walked into the meeting. The room fell silent. "I'm here to tell the truth," she announced. Her testimony was the final nail in the coffin. She revealed internal discussions, board meetings where Victor had openly discussed strategies to manipulate property values and force out undesirable homeowners. The city official leading the hearing, Laura Martinez, looked stunned. These allegations, if true, represent multiple violations of fair housing laws, municipal codes, and ethical standards. Victor's network of supporters began to disintegrate in real time. Real estate developers who had benefited from the HOA's practices now sat in silent panic. Board members who had once been his allies now avoided eye contact. As the hearing progressed, it became clear this was more than just a local dispute. The Pinewood Estates HOA had become a case study in community corruption. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," I said during my testimony. "We're fighting for every homeowner who's been bullied, every small business owner who's been targeted, every family who's been forced out of their home." The room erupted in applause. By the end of the 5-hour hearing, the outcome was inevitable. The current HOA board would be dissolved. A state-appointed oversight committee would be established. Criminal investigations were recommended. Victor Hartley sat motionless, his empire of bureaucratic tyranny collapsing around him. As we left the clubhouse that night, something had changed. Neighbors who had previously avoided each other now spoke, shared stories, celebrated. The quiet rebellion of Pinewood Estates had become a revolution. 6 months after the hearing that brought down the Pinewood Estates HOA, the neighborhood was unrecognizable. A state-appointed oversight committee had completely restructured the homeowners association. The new bylaws were a model of transparency and fairness, each rule carefully crafted to protect homeowners' rights rather than restrict them. Victor Hartley faced multiple legal challenges. A class action lawsuit, supported by dozens of current and former residents, sought damages for years of systematic harassment. His real estate development connections crumbled. The network of influence he carefully built over decades collapsed like a house of cards. Robert Garcia's business not only survived but thrived. The publicity from our fight had brought him more clients than he'd ever imagined. His work van, once a source of constant harassment, was now a symbol of resistance, proudly parked in his driveway. The most significant change was the community itself. Neighbors who had previously lived in fear and isolation now knew each other. Monthly community meetings became collaborative sessions where everyone's voice mattered. The clubhouse, once a place of bureaucratic intimidation, was now a true community center. Sarah had become something of a local hero. Her meticulous documentation and legal strategy were studied by homeowners' rights groups across the state. She was invited to speak at conferences, sharing our story as a blueprint for fighting HOA overreach. Emma Richardson's historical research had broader implications. Her investigation revealed similar patterns in HOAs across the region, sparking multiple investigations and reforms. The state legislature began drafting new laws to prevent the kind of systematic abuse we'd uncovered. Our case had become a catalyst for change, proving that community resistance could overcome entrenched systems of control. Not everything was perfect, of course. The scars of years of harassment weren't easily healed. Some families had been permanently displaced. Some businesses had been destroyed. But there was a sense of hope, a belief that things could be different. James Henderson, the former HOA treasurer who had turned whistleblower, found redemption. He became a key advisor to the new oversight committee, helping to create systems of checks and balances that would prevent future abuses. Margaret Hartley's testimony had been the final blow to Victor's empire. She'd found her own path to redemption, volunteering with local community support groups, working to undo some of the damage she'd previously been complicit in creating. Our home, once a target of endless violations, became a gathering place. We hosted community meetings, support groups for those who had been affected by HOA harassment. The garden gnome that had once earned us a $250 fine now stood as a quirky monument to our resistance. Emily Chen's investigative reporting had earned her multiple awards. The story of Pinewood Estates became a national conversation about community governance, property rights, and the abuse of power. At the one-year anniversary of the hearing, we held a community barbecue. Robert grilled, Sarah coordinated, Emma shared stories of local history, and I watched in amazement at how far we'd come. Victor Hartley, once the most feared man in the neighborhood, was now a cautionary tale. His name had become synonymous with bureaucratic tyranny, a warning about the dangers of unchecked power. As the sun set on our gathering, I realized we'd done more than just fight an HOA. We'd rebuilt a community. We'd shown that when people come together, when they refuse to be intimidated, real change is possible. The quiet rebellion of Pinewood Estates had become something much more, a revolution of hope, transparency, and genuine community. Our mailboxes could now be any color we wanted.